Hey, everybody. Today we're going to talk about how to pick out social channels for your brand. There are a lot of them and growing, some coming in, some leaving, all the things. So today we have John, a senior community manager at Ignite, and Lisa, who's a senior VP who's been working on strategy for like a gazillion years. That's a number. I don't think it is. Um, so what's the deal? What's happening with these channels? Why are there so many, and where do you even start? Any
Yes,
thoughts?
I mean, I think the thing that we're noticing is there's so many channels now that so many brands are still keeping up with. And I think at one point the number was exceeding like 11 social media channels that people were using. Not all brands are using all of those, but they are feeling the pressure for it. And so I think a lot of times when brands come to us, they're asking, how do I prioritize this? And we have to start with just the target audience on social and what the brand's actual goals are, to clarify that. So, John, I don't know if you have any experience how like choosing those channels, because I know that part of our community management process is looking at that data and then deciding which channels to be on. Do you have any kind of magic to share with us on how to select those?
I don't think there's a secret solution for our perfect answer, but I think, like you said, it starts with the audience and the people. It's people first. So I think it's super important as a brand to decide or figure out where the people you want to target are spending their time or what platforms they're already on, and then really see if the messaging or what your brand stands for makes sense on that platform. I think the other part of it too is kind of evaluating the social space or the social scape. I think Threads is a great example of that, where the launch was crazy. They had an insane amount of users signing up in such a short amount of time. But after the dust settled, not a lot of brands were quick to jump onto Threads. So I think it's really important to kind of evaluate and see, does it make sense. I don't think you need to be the first brand on a platform that comes out or that comes out with an advertising platform. I think it's okay to take a step back and look and see if that makes sense. And then I think the other part of it too is evaluating the kind of the volatility of the platform. I think Twitter X is another great example of that, and seeing how rapidly that one's changing, and then again evaluating if your brand wants to be in that social space. So that's
How
where I would
much does that
start. I think it's a
matter?
long answer, but people
It
first,
is.
definitely.
I'm wondering too, like maybe you should be there because the audience is there. You're like, oh my gosh, they came there in droves, and the research shows it. But what if the content's really hard to produce? Meaning, I'm thinking about TikTok when we're all shut down and we're just like, let's be on our phones and let's watch TikTok, and it's still very entertaining. But that was a heavy lift originally. What do you do if like you need to be there, but you're like, I don't know how to get there?
Well, one of the things that I feel like we look at is the ability to either source content that's already there or the ability to source it from influencer content. And there's just so many brands that might have a separate influencer team that's creating really great vertical video, and they're not lockstep with the organic social or the paid social team at all. And so sometimes that content is there, but not being leveraged as much as it could. And we see that a lot. There's also a lot of great UGC on TikTok and even Instagram reels that brands could procure and actually use if they took the time to ask, for a lot of like CPG brands and things like that. Now, obviously, if you're like a B2B brand, it might be hard to get some of that UGC and influencer
Yeah.
content as well.
So that's one question. The other question I have is what about these, and John, you talked about it, these channels that kind of go on the radar and then they suddenly leave. I'm thinking about Threads, but I'm also thinking about, was it Clubhouse? Do you remember that was a thing? Like,
Yeah, it's so funny that that was like, what's our strategy for Clubhouse? Um, and then what's
and,
our
and,
strategy for Threads?
and be real. Is that
Mm-hmm.
it? Like that's a
Be
thing.
real. I still think the default, the safe way to play it is that wait and see strategy. I
Yeah.
think there's more value in waiting to see if it makes sense than being a first one on a platform for sure.
Because once you start there, it's like you have to keep up, and we know what that's like. You can't just set it and forget it. Um, things have to move, things have to happen. You have to have a presence on the platform.
Yeah, and a lot of what we see with the data, going back to, so John, you mentioned target audience data, but then Missy, I know that your team and our analytics team looks at the channel performance. How is the channel actually performing? And we've run a couple of threads tests for clients right at launch and then again after launch. And you get no impressions data at all, so you don't know what the true reach is. But the engagements aren't any better. They're really dismal, actually, for the amount of time that you're spending on the post compared to what you get on a platform like Instagram or TikTok, and maybe even X. So, Missy, can you speak to kind of looking at the data and the strength of the channel for even
Yeah.
selecting that?
So looking at survey data, or any kind of data for that matter, to see if your audience is really using that platform. Not just are they using it, because honestly, believe it or not, contrary to popular belief, Gen Z is on Facebook. They're just on it like once a month. Not like baby boomers or Gen X, which will be there, and even millennials will more often. So yeah, they're there, but how often are they there? And how does it compare to everybody else? So, like, that's a third of Gen Z. But then if you look at the older audiences, it's probably still like 67% that are still using Facebook. And you couple that with Instagram and on Meta, you have a pretty strong platform. So, looking at that survey data to see are they there, in what numbers, how does that compare to everybody else? Um, and it's interesting too because it's like you think of the balance of maybe 9% are there. I'm thinking about a platform like Nextdoor, but then think about how does that compare to other channels, and if they're on those channels in larger numbers, or maybe an audience is on Nextdoor, which is a social platform, and it's in higher numbers than other audiences, but 9% is still pretty low. So how much effort are you going to put into that channel that doesn't really even have an organic presence so much? And that's the other thing is like I'm thinking about a channel that is great when it comes to paid, um, where you snap things and they go away, which is a widely used platform, has a cool features on it, AR, all the fun, all the stuff, all the fun stuff, um, lots of filters, lenses, all of it. But then what's that organic piece
Mm-hmm.
like on Snapchat?
And the organic reach right now on TikTok is so great. I know that that also kind of throws a little wrench in channel strategies right now because you look at the organic reach on other platforms like Facebook or even Instagram, and it's just not what TikTok is right now. Um, and but then there's also the question of organic is going to reach the people that are on your platform, and we encounter a lot of brands that don't have the right followers on their organic channels to reach, and they
Mm-hmm.
have these very niche audiences that they want to reach, and that requires paid media. So this is your area, Missy, but like paid media, what does that, how do you factor that in too? Because we have the organic side and what you can get organically, but then the paid
Yeah.
side
So
opens up.
a lot of targeting. If a channel has an organic presence and the followers aren't your target, or you're have another target you want to tap into, looking at the paid options is definitely a good way to go. The deal is they're all different. So you have to really dig into the tools and see what is available for you. So there's just no standards when it comes to the type of targeting using paid that you can use on each channel. They're all very, very different. Some have third parties built in, some you have to buy. I mean, most of them have matched or custom lists that you can do, or website retargeting and things like that. But the interests that you can choose, and if it's their data or a research partner's data, it's all different. So, I mean, it's also it can be contextual in nature. And I'm thinking about YouTube and Reddit, where you have Reddit, which has subreddits, which is funny because it's a way to target contextually because it's based on what people are writing about. Same with YouTube, and thinking about people who are in market, you know what they're searching for. So, or we don't, but YouTube does, and Google. So we know from that, like, there's this contextual piece that we can target that way. Now that's something you can't really do on Meta. So you have to really kind of dig deep and into it to get to the bottom. So that's a lot of things to think about. And then, John, as a CM, you have all these factors into play, and then you're coming up with basically the channels, and then also the cadence and the themes. So that's a lot to do. What do you think are the most important things to consider for brands?
Well, I really like the contextual targeting that you mentioned when you're talking about paid, and as far as what platforms brands might want to consider using or leveraging, and how that ties into like what ultimately they're picking for the strategy. And I love that paid being an opportunity for like a test and learn. As like we talked about, you don't have to be on every platform. It probably doesn't make sense to be on every platform. You don't need to be the first on every platform, but you don't know how successful you might be on one of these small niche or new platforms if you don't test and learn. And I think paid is a great way to go about doing that, is you don't have to set up an organic presence. You don't have to commit to regularly posting on the platform. But if you leverage some of those targeting tools, you can see, are the people that we want to target, is our target audience on this platform? Are they resonating with the messaging we're putting out there? So I love that test and learn opportunity from a paid standpoint. And then from our organic standpoint, on the flip side, you have to think, is this a platform that we do want to commit to making an organic presence on? And then, like you talked about, figuring out what cadence makes sense, what messaging is resonating with our audience, how often are they receiving our messages, are they receptive, what types of open discussions can we have on the platform, and those types of things. So I think really it's about spending time on the platform and just having that experience and understanding the scape and what types of actions or discussions people are having or doing on those.
And what do you think the biggest obstacle? So you commit to this organic presence on a channel. What do you think the biggest obstacles are? Is it the content? What is it that you find every day might even keep you up at night when it comes to that organic piece?
Well, I think the short answer, the easy answer, is each platform has its own problems or challenges. I think a great example is TikTok. And I think brands, when they look at TikTok and its success and the traction it's gotten and has recently, and the trajectory that it's set as maybe being a leading platform for this year, possibly next year, years to come. And they see that and they want to get involved. They want to jump in on that. But I think they're a little bit leery. It's a little bit intimidating because it's a video platform and because it's so popular and booming, and they want to become a part of that channel, but they don't know where to start or how to get the content. So I think content many times is a challenge in putting out good content and being relevant. For example, you want to be on TikTok, but you don't want to just put out, a video just for the sake of putting out a video. You want to put out something good. So I think content is a big challenge. And then on the other side, I think maintaining that community is also a challenge sometimes. I think putting out content's half of it, but then also continuing to put that effort in and engage with your fans, the people who are looking at your content, receiving your content, and making sure it's an open discussion, not a one-way source of messaging. So those are the things that keep me up at night.
Okay. I have a crazy question. Lisa, I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
And John, chime in because you might know the answer too. This drives me nuts because I volley back and forth in my head of what to do. Twitter. Call it X if you want. It's up to you. What do you do when you build up this organic presence and you have all these connections on a platform, but something happens unexpectedly? Like, I don't know, someone buys it who might be wearing crazy pants or not. What do you do? Do you switch channels? What do agencies have to think through when something like that happens or it's being banned?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have to go back to the data. Like, everyone looks at their follower counts as like this, like, we've built this following. But even,
Mhm.
I mean, whenever we look at reporting, a lot of the organic results on Twitter are not great.
Mhm.
And
True.
so, or X, I should say X, are not great. So it's just like all of that work. And sometimes we see hundreds of tweets annually, if not more than that, in reports. And then you don't see the engagements per post. You don't see the impressions per post like you need to. Unless you're like a media organization, you can probably back away or hand it over the keys to a court communications group and say this is only going to be used for like news or major updates that we think our investors might need to know as a company, but you might not need it from a branding standpoint as much. Or you notice that there's so many opportunities on LinkedIn if you're a B2B marketer and you've leaned on
True.
Twitter that you could go into LinkedIn. It might cost you more, but it's less volatile. It has some great targeting. You might
Yeah.
have to pay a little bit more, but it's worth it in the end because not every day you're wondering whether you should be there or not, which I feel like we are still, you know,
In a year,
asking
right?
ourselves over and over again, even this week, just what are we doing here? And is it even safe to be here as a brand? And so not having that complete question mark over and over again, I think a lot of brands are going to jump ship. That's just my prediction.
Yeah,
But there's better places to be, and that's what I think about that.
that's really good. John, do you have any predictions?
I'm with Lisa. I think, especially if you're talking about paid and you're spending money, there's probably better places to spend that money. I don't like the uncertainty from a community standpoint or community manager viewpoint on Twitter X right now. It's kind of the wild west of social media right now, and especially if you're worried about how your brand might be perceived or where you're going to live in the feed, I'd shy away from it and find better places to spend that time, money, and
Yeah.
content.
And I'll just add it's hard to get support because there's not a lot of staff there. So that isn't helpful for brands if they need to reach out and get help. Um, if you don't have the people power, because that's what makes things work. So
Mm-hmm.
that's our prediction there. You heard it. All right. Well, thank you for your time. This was awesome. I appreciate it. Everybody go out there, get lots of questions answered, find your channels, but no, it'll probably change the next day.
Absolutely.